Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I want to just present a few moments about some of the potential next steps that might happen after we've had this amazing fintech stroke techfin era with all sorts of animation. So let's think about that. If you ask people, about 3/4 of consumers said they want to have people understanding their behavior, number one. But actually over 60% of people said we want you to predict and forecast and take action on what you know about me and what you think I'll want to do next. And that's a completely different proposition from being fast to meet demand. It's about predicting it and preparing in advance without being crass or being difficult with what you do. And our consumers have always been, and in particular the last 10, 15 years, massively more disruptive and adopt new technology faster than any organization or even any network of organizations can ever possibly hope to achieve. So working with consumers, understanding consumers' activity is at the heart of everything that's going to happen as we go forward. I love this comment by Arthur C. Clarke, and he's a science fiction writer. He says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And much of what we've heard today, to many people, will appear to be magical. It will be amazing. You know, if you show a 90-year-old an iPad, they can't understand why glass has any intelligence, and it's almost impossible. So this is going to be a huge shift for a lot of people to cope with, in all truth. So, IoT, we've understood that. We get the fact there's sensors everywhere. We've heard about machine information, data being the new source or oil for the industry. We're going to use in financial services. So we will increasingly understand the environment that people are in and even how well they are. So if they're in a good mood emotionally, if they are physically well, wherever they are, you will begin to understand, and that contextualization will change the very nature of what your industry does and when it does it. Data is likely to come at us at the rate of about 1.7 megabytes a second per person on the planet next year. So we're not talking about a prediction 20 years out, we're talking about a prediction now. So if we haven't already decided how to organize data, or have a great partner, or we have a cloud strategy, and we have somebody who understands how to manipulate and manage that data, we are actually already in trouble. And increasingly, that data will become more important to us, and it will allow us to personalize the product offering, the service offering, that you or the fintech community will offer to individuals. And that may change by the minute. So the very notion or idea of product is one with the past. It's all about service proposition. And increasingly that will become harder to predict in many ways for a centralized organization. So financial services, which is the enabler of nearly everything we do in life. Not everything, of course. Falling in love doesn't require money unless you join an online service. Literally, nearly everything else we do requires money at some point or another, prepared in advance or used to achieve it. And that is going to allow us to increasingly get involved in people's lives by the very nature of it disappearing into the product and service of the world we live in. Essentially, the re-tech, the reinsurance, if you like, the real estate technology, the health technology will increasingly build into its proposition the fintech offer that's relying on maybe on bank technology, bank regulation. So what's really interesting is it goes much further than just taking centralized, regionalized banking capability, but actually putting it out through fintechs who in turn are part of a bigger ecosystem. And that ecosystem is one where people are reacting with real things in real life. And they are the things that people really care about. And they will be happy that you've helped them achieve what they want to do in their real life, quicker, faster, better, cheaper. And that's the goal in town, not just provide a financial product in a slightly better way. So think about it this way. So here I am individually. System, as we've talked about before, knows exactly where we are. We're sharing our diary, so it knows where we've been. It knows where we're going. It has access to all sorts of other information. Increasingly knows what we're interested in. So we've got a massive clue as to what people are going to care about in the next hour, the next minute, the next year, possibly the next 2 or even 3 or 5 years. And of course, that in turn gets influenced by who's around us and what's around us. So we contextualize information. All of that is a far cry from the ability to hold basic data on somebody and their performance around our products and services. And if you ask people, they're looking at 3 or 5 years, and without much encouragement, over 3/4 are saying that actually, of course, we'll interact for our financial services with non-traditional players. And they probably haven't got a clue who they are. And if they have, they probably think it's the big guys they already know. And the one thing we can be sure about, there will be new players in the next 5 years with new propositions based on this sort of philosophy. Equally, the notion of inclusion, which has been a holy grail of so many, in particularly emerging economies, is important to us, but probably outpaced by technical digital inclusion. The very nature of being included brings with it the ability to embrace financial services through our digital devices. We've heard about Ant Financial endlessly today, but the point about that is not that they've increased their customer base more than almost any bank in the world would desire. It's the fact that through their affiliation with Alibaba, they're integrated in that affiliation, if it's allowed, and that's the regulator's area of concern and issue, with all sorts of other platforms that are providing people with their way of living. And that's potentially the future model of banking as we talk about it in one respect. So Gojek or Grab or any of these transport services or Razor or others in these emerging worlds will increasingly start to offer new payment services and even deferring payment services and essentially extending credit to new players. So the notion of some of the services we've been used to starts shifting dramatically as it simply becomes part of the weft and weave of what we do. Gojek users have that concept of being able to pay later already. In China and Africa, we know that mobile payments and paying through our telecom account are increasingly helping people to become inclusive, but that is giving these organizations greater risk models than perhaps some of the greatest banks in the world would ever hope for, with the rate that these people are acquiring these technologies. And very quickly, of course, we've talked about TechFin versus FinTech, and there's been the whole bunch of different ideas about when they will enter the market. And in insurance, we've seen a number of times with major players moving in, Google Insurance, moving out, moving back in again, because of some of the constraints that they have on that type of business. Equally, we need to move away from the very concept of being involved in moments of someone's life and enabling them, their organization, their company, to achieve those moments, to being a life coach. And the very notion of having an ecosystem, a network, and collaborating with those organizations to essentially coach people to be more successful is an incredibly different model. Essentially, it needs a completely different mindset. And some of the organizations they will be embracing have already got 1 billion members. So it's not like it's someone with a tiny network of people we have to grow together. We can work with people who have already got a massive connection. And through all sorts of propositions, these organizations can collaborate and potentially be a competitor at the next. So that whole notion of competition, which has been embraced elsewhere, may well be something that we embrace in FinTech. And the last couple of slides I want to share with you is this very notion. When I look at all users of technology, from the very first notions, they invariably don't look viable. So I think Marshall Foch, we were talking about yesterday, he ran the First World War in Europe, and he said aircraft would never be useful as a military device. I don't know about you, but that sort of changed a bit, and now we just build ships at huge expense to move aircraft around the world. We're very good at dismissing technology as not being important until it becomes so important it changes everything. And that's the notion of this. First we do things differently, which is the same things essentially with new technology, but then we do completely different things. We behave completely differently. So it isn't about converting. Digitalization isn't a project in the bank for existing processes. It's about offering brand new capability to your target market through the partnerships you have. And even that in and of itself is a brand new concept. And Jack Welch said this: leaders' job is to look ahead to see the future and see how the organization should be formed as it needs to be, not as it is now. And that organization, that cultural matter, is at the absolute heart of organizations' industries changing. Without that organizational change, without that attitudinal change, that behavior change, technology itself can't make the move it needs, and there'll be winners and losers. Some are saying that 80% of existing financial services players will cease to exist through irrelevance. I'm not actually sure I'm entirely convinced of that number. I think many, many organizations will morph into something completely different. But there will be those that cannot change, and then irrelevance will look quite attractive. So the whole point is that the idea in the future is not that technology matters, which it does, and even that organizational structure doesn't matter, which it does. It's our mental mindset, our attitude towards this new world we're embracing that's going to allow us to embrace it. Finally, technology goes from being hidden, maybe behind fintechs, and then finally disappears. We don't even know which bank we're dealing with, on what basis, whenever, because what used to matter doesn't matter now. And as Anthony said earlier, we need to be assured that our money is safe, and therefore banks in the traditional sense will have a vital role to play, and that's where maybe our money is finally centered, but we'll interact with it through players that have been authorized, but approach the use of money in a completely different way. So finally, when the risk of doing nothing is greater than the risk of doing something, we innovate. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.